All right, good morning. Today's daf in Marmoid Cut and Chaf Dalet and Chaf Hey. We're going to try and get through all of Chaf Hey all the way to the very, very bottom last line. So we're starting Moed Cut and Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph right at the top of the Amud first word. Ba'amine Rabbi Yochanan Mishmuel. Rabbi Yochanan asked the following of Kasha of Shmuel: Yesh avelus b'Shabbos, o ein avelus b'Shabbos. So are we noheg the minhagim of avelus on Shabbos or not? Amar lei ein avelus b'Shabbos. Shmuel says we do not practice avelus on Shabbos. Yes, Rabbanan kami de Rav Papa v'kami mishmei de Shmuel. So the Rabbanan sat before Rav Papa, and they said over this mimer that ein avelus b'Shabbos in the name of Shmuel. Sorry, they said the following mimer in the name of Shmuel. Avel sheshimesh mitasu b'mei evlo chayav misa. That an avel who has marital relations during his avelus of Shiva is chayav misa. This is misa b'dei shamayim. Amar le Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, I'm going to make a correction to your statement in the name of Shmuel. First of all, Asr Itmar, it's Asr to be Mishamish Mita during Avelus, but not Chayav Misa. Umishmei de Rabbi Yochanan Itmar. And it wasn't in the name of Shmuel, it was the name of Rabbi Yochanan. V'ishmielechu mishmei de Shmuel, hachishmielechu. And if you heard anything in the name of Shmuel regarding this issue of Avelus on Shabbos, the following is what you heard. Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi, Amar Shmuel, Rav Tachlifa, the son of Avimi, says the name of Shmuel, Avel, Shelo Para v'Shelo Pirim, Chayav Misa. An Avel who does not let his hair grow and does not tear his clothes is Chayav Misa. Good morning. Shinemar, we are on a Moed Cut and Chaf Daled, about 10 lines down. Shinemar, Roshechem al Tifro, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanding the Kohanim to say that because of their special status, they cannot let their hair grow and they cannot tear their clothes, and they should not do those things to avoid death. So that means that somebody else in Avelus who does not let their hair grow and does not tear their clothes is Chayav Misa. Amar of Rafram Bar Papa, Tana be'Avel Rabasi. So Rafram Bar Papa says that we learn in Avel Rabasi. There's a Masech that Rashi refers to it as Maseches Smachos. There's Avel Rabasi, Avel, I think it's called Zuta, and the Avel Rabasi is a Tanaitic but not incorporated into Shas text that includes a lot of the halachas of Avelus. Teaches us the following: Avel Asr l'shamish mitasu b'yemei evlo. An Avel is not allowed to have marital relations during Shiva. And there's a story of somebody who had marital relations during his Shiva, and pigs snatched away his body. There's a second lashon in Rashi that says that Giviyaso doesn't mean his body. It means his aver as a mida keneged mida, that he was mishamish mita during his Shiva, and therefore he was punished with the removal of that particular body part. Amar Shmuel Pachas Chova Neter Rishus. So these are, of course, acronyms. Morning. These are acronyms, and we'll find out what we're talking about immediately. Priyas Harosh, that's the pay. Chazaras Kerala Achorov, moving his torn clothing behind him, and Zakifas Hamita Chova, and standing up his bed on Shabbos. These are Chova. Moed Cut and Chaf Daled, 15-20 lines down. So on Shabbos, so in this case, Priyas Harosh, Rashi explains, second line, means uncovering the head. There was a very special wrapping, Kemenaga Yishmaelim, we're going to talk a little bit about now, turning your torn clothes around so that the tear is not in the front, and flipping your bed back up to its proper stance is a chova on Shabbos. This is in keeping with Shmuel's view that ein avelus b'Shabbos. Ne'ilas hasandal, tashmish shamita, rechitzes yadayim v'raglayim b'chamin arvis, but putting your shoes back on, tashmish shamita, and washing your hands and feet with hot water right before Shabbos, that is a rishus. V'Rav Amar af priyas harosh rishus. Rav holds that even uncovering of the head is a rishus and not a chova. Ushmuel, my shna nilas hasandal de rishus. So in Shmuel's opinion, why is putting on shoes not a requirement. We all know that when somebody's sitting Shiva, they're wearing socks or Crocs or something other than proper footwear. So why, according to Shmuel, isn't that a chova? He answers the lav kuliyam abidi, because not everybody wears shoes that are tied all the time. So by keeping them untied, it's not necessarily a siman that you're still in Avelus. So the Gemara asked, well, Priyas Harosh nami lav kuliyam abidi de megala rashayu. But what about Priyas Harosh, uncovering your head? Not everybody walks around with an uncovered head all the time. So the answer, so why isn't that something that you are, that is a rishus? Shmuel Tamei, Amar Shmuel, Kal Kerashina B'Shas Chimum Eno Kara. So Shmuel's going to make two statements. So we're going to deal with the second one first. He says, first of all, any kara, any tearing of the clothes that is not B'Shas Chimum, and Rashi defines Shas Chimum, see if I can find it here, second narrow line, Shas Chimum, B'Shas Hascholas Hatzar. This is at the beginning of the pain when a close family member passes away, B'Shas Misa. This is a kara right at the moment that somebody passes away. And the second statement of Shmuel, V'chol atifa she'ena ka'atifas Yishmaelim, and any atifa, any wrapping of the head that is not like the wrapping of the Yishmaelim is not considered an atifa. So the chova that Shmuel teaches that one is required to unwrap, it's not just if you have your head covered, you put a ball cap on or a kippah. It's a special wrapping of the Yishmaelim. And the other area of halacha where the atifas Yishmaelim is really no geya and very ma'akev is putting on a talis gadol. And there's a certain way to actually make sure that we wrap the talis gadol in the morning so that we are yotze with the bracha of lehisatef. If we don't fully wrap it around our head and shoulders, and there's going to be an example right now of what that means, there's a question of whether you're yotze. So, and to demonstrate what atifas Yishmaeli means, Machli Rav Nachman ad gobe de dikna. Rav Nachman demonstrated wrapping his head until, I think this is translated in the art school as the hollows of his cheeks. And it's a bit of a machlokus of what does this mean? So Rashi says that it means this part right here, that's below the mouth. Other people hold that it means the hollows of the cheeks, which are this part, sort of equal to or slightly above the mouth, but up to the tip of the nose. But either way, it's a statement of Rav Nachman demonstrating just how high up the bottom of the face atifas Yishmaelim goes. So we have this statement of Shmuel that unwrapping this atifas Yishmaelim on Shabbos is a chova, because that is a very clear demonstration. It's a chova on Shabbos because it's a very clear demonstration of Avelus. What's that? I just posted the picture from Steinfeld. Oh yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yaakov says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Lo shanu, that the atifas, that undoing an atifas Yishmaelim is a chova, ela she'ein lo min olam meraglav. That's only if he's still not wearing shoes. Abal yesh lo min olam meraglav. But if he's already wearing shoes, min olin mochichin alav. So then his shoes demonstrate that he's no longer in Avelus, and then it's not necessary to unwrap the atifas Yishmaelim. Tosfos Lo Shonu questions this. He says, I don't get it. Why is it that that shoes are the trigger? Maybe you only need one or the other. So he answers, no, maybe that shoes are a bigger giveaway that somebody is not practicing Simani Avelus than head wrapping. Weiter in the Gemara, the second to last narrow line on Moed Katan Chaf Daled Amud Aleph. This was Shmuel's first statement. Kol kera she'eno b'shas chimum, any tear that is in one's clothing that isn't made at the time of a close relative's death, eno kera. That is not considered a halachic tearing. So now the Gemara is going to go through a few examples proving that that might not be the case. Good morning. We are Moed Katan Chaf Daled. We are just now starting the last narrow line toward the end of the line. Moed Katan Chaf Daled. Now, and so the Shmuel said, just to catch up those who are just joining now, Shmuel made two statements. The first of which we're going to investigate now, and that statement was that any tear by an avel that is not made at the time of a family member's or a close family member's death is not considered Kera La'alacha. But when Shmuel found out that the famous Rav had passed away, Karale Treser Manik, he tore 12 garments. Amar, because Shmuel said, Azal Gavra Dahava Mistafina Mine, because a great person has gone, and I was afraid of him. Rashi says, what does it mean I was afraid of him? Rashi says, the Mistafina Mine Bekushos, because he was very sharp in questioning me about my learning. So that's one example of a kera that was not b'shas chimum. Shmuel presumably found out sometime after Rav had passed away. Amrle Rabbi Yochanan nach nafshe de Rabbi Chanina. They told Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Chanina passed away. Karala telesar itzili milsa, and they Rabbi Yochanan tore 13 garments of fine wool. Now, once again, he found out later, but even if he had found out on time, one doesn't wear 13 garments in one day. So presumably he was tearing garment after garment, day after day. So at least some of these tears were not b'shas chimum. So if that's the case, why are they bothering? Shmuel just taught kol kera she'eina b'shas chimum eino kera. And similarly, Rabbi Yochanan said about Rabbi Chanina, Amar azol gavra adam mistafina minei. A great person passed away, and I was afraid of him. So what is it with these tears? Why were they even bothering? Shani Rabbanan, because great Talmidei Chachamim are different. Why? Because we repeat their learning of Torah all the time in the Beis Medrash. It's as if we are hearing it for the first time, the Shas Ma'aseh, right when they passed away, because their words of Torah keep them alive. Amalei Ravin Bar Ada Rava. Ravin Bar Ada says to Rava, Amar Talmid Rav Amram, your Talmid Rav Amram taught, Tanya, Avel Kol Shiva Koro Lefanav. An Avel, all 7 days of Shiva, the tear in his clothing has to be visible, has to be right in front of him. V'im Balahachlif, Machlif V'Korea. And if for whatever reason he spills coffee on his shirt, he needs to change his shirt, guess what? You need to tear the new shirt as well. The Shabbos, Koro La'achorav. But on Shabbos, you turn your garment around so that the Siman Avelus is not visible. And if you need, for whatever reason, to change your clothing on Shabbos, obviously you go ahead and change it and you don't tear it. So we see, by the way, from the first half of this statement, that if you need to change your clothes, you tear it again. But once again, that's not b'shas chimum. So why are you bothering? Kitanya hahi b'chvod aviv ve'imo. This is when somebody's sitting shiva, Rahman al-Islam, for a parent, and out of the kavod for their parent, they go ahead and re-tear, and that explains why they go ahead and do so. So now the Gemara wants to know, Osan karayin misachin or la'oin misachin. These extra tears that we do for our rabbeim, or a second tear shalom b'shas chimum for one of our parents, are we to repair that tear or not? Pligi ba'avu de Rav Oshia u'bar kapora. So machlokas between these two amoraim. Chad amar ein misachin and chad amar misachin. One said, yes, we go ahead. One says we don't repair, and the other says we do. So it makes sense to say that the father of Rav Oshia says that we don't fix a tear that we make for Kriyas Avelim, Rav Oshia in Misachin. Because Rav Oshia, the son of Avua, right, the son of his father, holds in Misachin. But Gemara says, Miman Shmi Alei. Love me, Avua. So who did Rav Oshia hear, if not from his father? Answers the Gemara, lo, mibar kapara Rabbi Shmielei. Nope, he heard it from his Rebbe. So we can't necessarily prove that it was Avua, the Rav Oshia, who held ein misachin. Amar Rava, Avel metayel beunkali b'soch beso. So Rava says that an Avel can walk around his own home in his unkali, which is like a mourning garment, in his own home on Shabbos. Abaye Ashkechel Rav Yosef the Paris Le Sudra Areshe. So Abaye found that Rav Yosef had his head wrapped as a siman avelus, and he was wandering around his home in that way on Shabbos during his avelus. Amar le lav savar lamar ein avelus b'Shabbos. Rebbe, don't you know the halacha in the name of Shmuel that we don't have practice avelus on Shabbos? Amar le hachem Rabbi Yochanan. So. Who are we talking about here? Remind me. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, well, Rav Yochanan taught the following: Dvarim shebetzina noheg. That practices of Avelus that are done in private, that we do. Okay, 2 dots, 4 lines from the bottom. You could do it if you want to. And remember, a lot of those things fall into the Rishus category. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Atzeres Keshabbos. So Rabbi Eliezer taught in the Mishnah back on, I think, Yotes Amud Aleph, that that once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Shavuos, for which you used to be able to bring korbanos as tashlumin for 7 days, even though Shavuos was only 1. And he also held that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur each count as a 7-day yantif when it comes to Avelus. So that was the statement of Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah. Amar Rav Gidol bar Menasya, Amar Rav Shmuel, Amar Shmuel halacha Rabbi Gamliel. So once again, halacha in the name of Shmuel by Avelus, that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, and the principle here, according to Shmuel, is that by Avelus we are usually mekel. So we allow those days to count. So we're going to have an example in the Gemara, for example, where 3 individual days of yantif get you through like a 21-day count. I think it's, you sit Shiva for 1 day, Erev Sukkot, and then you have 7 days of Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeres. So those 8 point whatever days get you through the 21, and then all you have left is 9. So we'll see that in just a second. V'ika damasni laha, the Rav Gidol bar Menasya aha. And there's some who say that this teaching of Rav Gidol bar Menasya that we just said in the name of Shmuel was really a different learning altogether. Kol shloshim yom. This is the very sad part of today's daf. Kol shloshim yom. If a baby Rahman al-Islam passes away less than 30 days old, tinok yotze b'cheik v'nikaver b'isha achas u'shnei anashim. That a baby does not need to be taken out on a bier or in a casket, but the baby can be brought out, held. B'cheik means a bosom, it means held by hand. V'nikaver b'isha achas u'shnei anashim. It can be buried with 1 woman and 2 men privately. Aval lo b'ish echad b'shnei nashim, but not by 1 man and 2 women because of yichud. Turn to the top of Chafdal and Obeis. Abba Shmuel Omer af b'ish echad u'shnei nashim, but Abba Shmuel says no. Even 1 man and 2 women, we're not worried about yichud. This is such a horrific and horrible and sad occasion that we're not worried about yichud. Ve'ein omdim alav b'shura, and we don't stand in the line after the burial. Ve'ein omer alav birkas avelim, we don't say the birkas avelim. We v'tanchumi avelim. So the practice for the burial and the avelus of a baby, Rahman al-Islam, less than 30 days old, is very different from others. However, ben shloshim yosei b'deluskama. But a baby that's 30 days old goes out with a deluskama, and the Steinsaltz, you will see, Zevi can put it in the chat, that it looks like a sort of a concrete rectangular box with a sort of a teepee roof like this. And it was designed to be carried by 1 person for a small box or 2 people for a large one. And it was covered to the mace. Thank you, Zevi. Ben shloshim yosei b'deluskama, but a 30-year-old goes out in this sort of in some sort of a casket. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo deluskama hanitelas b'katef. It's not one that you can carry yourself on your shoulder. That's not so kavadik. Ela hanitelas be'agapayim. But it is one that is held by 2 people with their hands. Now remember, so we're talking about a baby Rahman al-Islam that it was at least 30 days old, but less than a year. The omdin alav v'shura. We do stand in the traditional line. The omrim alav birkas avelim b'tanchumi avelim, and we say the birkas avelim, and we wish hamakim yinachem. Now, Ben Yud Beis Chodesh. Ben Yud Beis Chodesh. What about a 12-month-old? Yosei b'mita. So a 12-month-old already, we give that 12-month-old the respect of being taken out to burial on a bier. Rabbi Akiva Omer, hu ben shana ve'evrav keben shtayim. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that there needs to be some aspect of this 12-month-old that is as if he's a 2-year-old. So it's either he's a 1-year-old, but has limbs that are developed like a 2-year-old, or ben shtayim, or he is actually a 2-year-old, ve'evrav keben shana, but his limbs are developed at least like a 1-year-old. Yotzei b'mita. So according to Rabbi Akiva, those are the qualifications to go out on a bier. We are on Moed Katan Daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis. We are about 10 lines from the top, 6, 7 lines up in the narrow lines. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Hayotze b'mita. The practice is that any mace that is taken out to his or her burial on a bier, Rabbi Matzivim Alav, that the public will grieve over the mace. Eino Yotze b'mita, ein Rabbi Matzivim Alav. But anybody who is not taken out on a bier, the masters would not be grieving over him. Rabbi Elazar ben Azar Yomer Nikar Rabbi Misaskim Mimo. Well, let's say this 12-month-old never left the house for whatever reason. So if he did leave the house, then the multitudes would be involved in his burial. But if he was not known to the public, if for whatever reason he never made it out of the house, maybe he wasn't well, then you don't find that the whole population would be involved. Now, what is the halacha regarding a very young child regarding hesped? Rabbi Meir b'shem Rabbi Shmuel Omer aniyim b'nei shalosh, that aniyim are maspid, a child that passed away as young as 3 years old. Ashirim b'nei chamesh, wealthy people are maspid, a child that passes away when the child is 5. And the reason for this distinction is so awful, but it is because aniyim have nothing else to give them joy in their life. And as a result of that, an ani who loses a child is maspid that child even at 3 years old, while ashirim, who have other things presumably to occupy them and to bring them simcha, are not maspid until the age of 5. We should never know from this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Aniyim b'nei chamesh, Ashirim b'nei sheish. And this is the way we paskin, that Aniyim are not maspid a child until that child is 5, and wealthy people until 6. Ubnei zekenim kibnei Aniyim. And the children of older people, I don't know what the qualification is for older, they mourn their children as if at the same status of Aniyim. Amar Rav Gidl bar Menashe Amar Rav, halacha Rabbi Yehuda Shamar Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. So Rav Gidl bar Menashe says the name of Rav, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that we are maspid children who are ages 5 for Aniyim, 6 for Ashirim. Third wide line down. Darash Rabbi Anani bar Sason apischa de Beinasiya. So Rabbi Anani bar Sason gave the following drasha at the doorway to the house of the Nasi. Yom echad lifnei atzeres v'atzeres harekan arba asar. That if somebody said Shiva on Erev Shavuos and then has Shavuos, that counts for 14 of the 30 days of Avelus, because we say Mechzak Yom Kikulo by Avelus, and that's your Shiva. And then the Yantif is Ola for Shloshim. The Yantiv, as we saw a few daf ago, counts towards Shloshim. Shamar Rabbi Ami v'ikbid. Rabbi Ami heard this from Rabbi Anani, and he was upset, not at what he said, but he said, Amar atu didehi, Amar atu didehi, is that your own statement? Rabbi Anani bar Sason. No, Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shayahi. And you did not say it in his name. Another similar example, Darish Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Akila Deresh Kilusa, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Darshan on the porch. Some say tent. There's a different girsa here that says it. All this word should also be pischa, that it should also be the doorway of the Reish Galusa. Either way, at the front of the Reish Galusa's home. Same limud, that if you said Shiva Erev Shavuos and then you had Shavuos, you're already 14 days into your 30 days.
Remind me, the Shavuos counts as a whole week?
Yes. Shavuos counts as a week, and we'll see the limud in a second.
Oh, we didn't learn that yet, did we? We didn't get that.
Only if you've learned this Gemara once before.
Well, it's been a month.
The Balei Kriya will recognize the line in just a second. Shamar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes heard this. Ikbid, he was very upset. Amar atu didei. Is that your limud? Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yoshaya. That's not your limud. Why didn't you say his name in his name? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yoshaya. Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Shaya, Minayin la'atzeres sheyesh la'tashlumin. Here you go. How do we know that atzeres has tashlumin for korbanos that you missed on Shavuos day for 7 days? Shneimar v'chag hamatzos v'chag hashavuos, and the Bach adds in v'chag hasugos. Ma chag hamatzos yesh la'tashlumin kol shiva. Just like Pesach, if you missed the korbanos on day 1, you can bring that same korban all 7 days of Pesach. V'chag hashavuos yesh la'tashlumin kol shiva. So too by Shavuos. Ad Rav.
Yeah, I didn't know that instead of counting it as 7.
It did. However, we say now that we just learned Mishachara Beis Hamikdash, Shavuos counts as 1. It no longer counts as 7. Or we're about to learn it.
Limud is a famous limud. not a new limit.
I think didn't we just cover that? I think we just covered it.
Yeah, this is one of the.
All right. Adbare Rav Papa, 7 lines from the bottom, right in the middle. Adbare Rav Papa Rav Avia Saba. Rav Papa gave Rav Avia Saba permission to darshan v'darash, and he said the following: Yom Echad Lifnei Rosh Hashanah v'Rosh Hashanah Harei Kan Arbasa. So the same deal by Rosh Hashanah, that if you sit Shiva Erev Rosh Hashanah and then you have Rosh Hashanah, you're in for 14 days already. Amar Ravina Hilkach Yom Echad Lifnei Achad v'Chag v'Shmini Shelo Harei Kan Esrim v'Echad Yom. So this is the example I said earlier. So if one sits Shiva Erev Sukkot, and then you have 7 days of Sukkot, and then you have Shmini Atzeres, which is Chag B'Fnei Atzmo, then you are up to 21 days. And that means that how many do you have left?
9 days.
9 days. 9 days left. Ravina equal Lusur the Pras. Sorry, it's a little math quiz. It's early. I know. Ravina went.
These examples in general are interesting because you don't normally have Shloshim, right? Because you have like Rosh Hashanah, you have Yom Kippur, and you have Sukkot. These things are going to knock off Shloshim anyway.
Right, Shloshim's gone. If you run into nowadays, if you run into any of these Yom Tovim, there's no Shloshim.
The shortest is by Yom Kippur.
That's right. And
Yom Kippur and Sukkot stop on Shloshim.
So it's like it's funny. The Gemara goes through the whole
with
thing.
regard to shaving.
Except with regard to shaving.
Yeah,
I don't know. Ask your LOR. Ask your LOR.
You still have to observe 30 days.
Amarle Rav Chaviva Misura de Pras. Rav Chaviva, who lived in Surah on the Euphrates River, the Ravina. Amar Mar. Yom Echad Lifnei Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah Reikan Arbasa. So he says to Ravina, did you say that if somebody sits Shiva on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and then you have Rosh Hashanah that you knock out 14 days? Amar Lei, and Ravina said back to him, and there's a lot of discussion in the Rishonim about what the following line means. Ana mistavra k'Rabban Gamliel hu da'amina. What I meant was that Rabban Gamliel's opinion sounds logical or reasonable. And there's a machlokas as to whether Ravina actually paskined like Rabban Gamliel, this whole Rosh Hashanah Mahalach, or just said, it sounds logical, but I don't paskin that way. On your own time, it's worth looking into. There's a whole big sugya there over what he meant, but we'll just go with the straight translation. Okay, we are at the Mishnah. What time is it? Anybody know?
Yeah, 13.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to try and get to the bottom of Chafei Amud Beis. We're gonna roll right through it. Mishnah. So you don't tear kriya, and you don't remove your shoes, and you don't have the Sudas Havra, or the only people who do those things are those who are close relatives of the family member. And there's also a machlokas over what this line means, but you don't have the Sudas Havra except on a bed that is stood up properly. That either refers to the Avelim or refers to those who are eating with the Avelim. We'll see possibly what that means. Okay, Gemara, first word on the top of Chafei Amud Aleph. So the Gemara wants to know, well, what about the Afilu Chacham? But even if a Chacham passed away, we have to do these things. Vatanya, Chacham Shemei Sakol Krovav. Chacham dies, we're all his family. Hakol Krovav Salka Daitach, says the Gemara. Do you mean, take that literally? Ela Hakol Kik Krovav. No, we're like the Chacham's family. Hakol Korin Alav, because we all tear Kriya. Hakol Chotzin Alav, we take off our shoes. Hakol Marvin Alav Birachava, and we have a Sudas Havra outside the Beis HaKvaros. Lo, says the Gemara. Lo tzricha delav chachamu. Our Mishnah is not talking about a case of chacham. Our Mishnah is talking about somebody who passes away who's not a chacham. The adam kasher who chiyuvim mechayev lemikra. But what about an adam kasher? Somebody who's a yashar, somebody who keeps the mitzvos. Titani b'gnei ma banav b'nosef shalad mesim kishen kitanim. For what reason do a person's children die when they are young? Kedei sheyivka v'yisabel al adam kasher, so that he'll learn his lesson and that he'll cry and mourn when an adam kasher passes away. Says the Gemara, Yivka v'yisabel arvona kashakim linei. Are you kidding me? You're going to take a security or a deposit from this person so that later on, if one day an adam kasher passes away, he'll cry and mourn appropriately? That's cruel. No, that's not what it means. It's a punishment for not crying and mourning an adam kasher. Because anybody who cries for an adam kasher, that mace has all of his sins forgiven because of the honor that was shown to him by people who mourned his loss. The lav adam kasher. So all that is a question. We see that you're supposed to mourn for an adam kasher, and you're supposed to do all these simanei avelus. Says the Gemara, nope, our mission is not talking about that case. We're talking about a case where it's not an adam kasher. So now a third example. But if we're in the room and somebody passes away, so you're chayiv to tear kriya and do all these other simanei avelus. The Tanya Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, ha'omid ala meis b'shas yitzias mishama chayiv likroa, because Reb Shimon ben Elazar says that anybody who's with a mace at the time that person is nifter, you have to tear kriya. Lamazeh dome l'sefer Torah shenisra shechayiv likroa. So we see it that he compares it to a sefer Torah that's burned, that you're obligated to tear kriya. So answers the Gemara. Okay, so we're talking about a case where he wasn't there at the time the person died. He only heard about it afterwards. Kinach nafshe de Rav Safra lo karu rabbanan aleh. When Rav Safra passed away, the Talmidei Chachamim did not tear kriya. Amri, because they said lo gamrina mineh. We never learned from him directly. We only learned from him indirectly. Amrlahu Abaye mitanya harav shemes. Did the Brisa say that when your Rebbe passes away, Chacham shemes Tanya? The Brisa says a Talmid Chacham, any Talmid Chacham. So why didn't you tear kriya? Ve'od, and furthermore, like we said before, Kol Yom Shemaitze Befumin B'Beit Medrasha, that we're saying over their teachings all day long, and if that's so, it's always a Shas Chimum. Of course, you should tear kriya. So these Talmidei Chachamim Sabur, they thought, all right, so we already didn't do that. So what? No, so now we're stuck. Amr lahu Abaye Tanina. So Abaye says we learn Chacham calls man Joskim behesped chayav mikroa, that as long as you're still dealing with hesped and for Talmid Chacham, you have to tear kriya. So Sabur the mikra altar. So they then immediately want to tear kriya right that moment. Amr lahu Abaye, hold on. Tanya, we also learn Chacham kavod behesped though. You have to wait till they're actually being masped to Talmid Chacham. Then you should go ahead and tear kriya. Kinach nafshe de Rav Huna, a very long story about the passing of Rav Huna. Fascinating. Kinach nafshe de Rav Huna savar the osuve sefer Torah b'apuya. When Rav Huna passed away, they wanted to put a sefer Torah on his bed or on his bier. Rashi says to say that he was makayim everything in the sefer Torah. Amr lehu Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said to the other people around, Milsad b'chaylo svirle hashta leikum le'avidle. He held that you're not allowed to sit on the same surface as a Sefer Torah. He held that way. So now you're going to put a Sefer Torah on his bier? How disrespectful is that? What?
The point is, I think he was against the idea.
He was against the idea. So you're going to insult his body by doing so? I saw Rav Huna who wanted to sit down on a bed. The Havamanach Sefer Torah Aleh, but there was already a Sefer Torah there, so what did he do? The Kafkada Ahara, he flipped the jug over on the ground, Sefer Torah Iluya, and he put the Sefer Torah on the jug, proving that he held he's not going to sit on the same surface as a Sefer Torah. So we see that he held that you can't sit on a surface that has a Sefer Torah. So now what happened? They couldn't get his beer out the door, meaning the beer was too wide to fit through the doorway. So So they thought to lower his body on the beer from the roof. Rav Chisda said, no, but we learned from Rav Huna that for a Talmid Chacham, the kavadik way to do it is through the doorway. So they thought, well, maybe we'll move him from a wider beer to a narrower beer, and then we'll move him through the door. Rav Chisda, who was the protector of Rav Huna's teachings, that the real kavod is in his first placement. How do we know this? That they put the Aron Elokim on the Agalah Chadasha, on the new wagon, which refers to the first wagon that I believe, you'll correct me, Rabbi Feifel, that the Plishtim built originally to give the Aron back to Klal Yisrael. So we see, it doesn't mean a different one that is new now. It means the one that they originally built. So what did they do? So they smashed the doorway and they put him through the door. Pasach ale Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba started the Hespedim and said the following. Ra'ui Haya Rabbeinu Shetishre Alav Shechina, that our Rebbe Rav Huna merited having the Shechina on him, El Shabavil Garmale, but he lived outside of Eretz Yisrael. So what was he supposed to do? Masi Rav Nachman Bar Chisda, V'amri La Rav Chanan Bar Chisda. So one of the people who was there, Rav Chanan Bar Chisda or Rav Nachman Bar Chisda said, Hayo Haya Devar Hashem El Yechezkel Ben Buzi HaKohen Be'eretz Kasdim. So, hey, we see that Yechezkel had Nevuah outside of Eretz Yisrael. So what's the issue? So his father sort of wrapped him on the a little slap on the wrist with a sandal. Hey, stop talking. I've told listen to this line. This is such a dad line. Haven't I told you not to bother everybody else with your questions?
How many times?
How many times have I told you? So now, but the Gemara wants to know. The truth is, it's a pretty good question. So says the Gemara, "My haya." So what does this mean? Hayo haya devar Hashem el Yechezkel shahaya kvar, because Yechezkel already had nevuah in Eretz Yisrael, and his nevuah in Shinar in Bavel was a continuation of his nevuah outside of Eretz Yisrael. Ki asku lahasam. Now, when they got Rav Huna's body to Eretz Yisrael, I have no idea how long that trip takes, but presumably by camel or donkey or whatever. Amrulei Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi. They told Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, Rav Huna Asi, Rav Huna is coming. Amru. And they were mystified by this. When we were there in Bavel, we were so terrified of Rav Huna, we couldn't even lift our heads up in his presence. But now that we came to Eretz Yisrael, Asa Basrein, he's now following us. We don't deserve this. Amru lahu Aronoba. So they said, it's his Aron. He's no longer with us. Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, Nafuk. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi went out to greet Rav Huna's beer. Rabbi Ilah, Rabbi Chanina lo nafuk, but Rabbi Ilah and Rabbi Chanina didn't. And he could Amri Rabbi Ilah nafuk, Rabbi Chanina lo nafuk. And some say that Rabbi Ilah did go out to greet him, and Rabbi Chanina did not. Now, why did they do these specific actions or lack of actions? Did nafak my time? Why did they go out? Tanya, we learn. Aron over me makom l'makom, that when a mace is going from one place to another. We stand in a line and we say Birkas Havelim and Tanchumi Havelim. Delo nafak. What's the reason? My time at the Tanya Arona over mimakam l'makom ein omdim alav b'shura ein omdim alav Birkas Havelim v'Tanchumi Havelim. An exact opposite brisa. Kashin Hadadi, says the Gemara.
So
we have a sira.
They're saying they're doing Nichma Havelim before the Kfura, while the Aron is
right. The brisa teaches that one of these brises teaches that when an Aron is on the move, on the way to burial, from one place to another, they show covenant mace, and they do. They say Birkas Nichma.
They do Nichma Havelim.
Yes,
I see.
That's what the brisa teaches. Says the Gemara, but then you have one that says exactly the opposite. Says the Gemara lo kasha. Conscious shaldo kayemes, kan b'shein shaldo kayemes. One is when the body, or I think it's really the skeleton, is still intact, and the other, where they don't go greet it, is when maybe the trip's been so long and the body's fully decomposed, and then the minhag is to not go greet. Rav Huna shaldo kayemes hava, but Rav Huna's body and skeleton was still intact. So why didn't Rav Chanina go out and greet? Delo nafak. So why didn't he go out? Lo seimu akame. Because they never got a chance to get the word out that Rav Huna was still, even in his, deceased state, still physically intact and deserved that cover. Okay.
And to your point, it's probably a lengthy trip in these days.
Probably. Who knows how long? Amri. So now they get Rav Huna to Eretz Yisrael, but now there's a practical matter. Heicha ninche, where should we lay him to rest? Physically, where should we bury him? Rav Huna rebits Torah b'Yisrael. Rav Huna was a Marbitz Torah. Rav Chia rebits Torah b'Yisrael, and so was Rav Chia. Hava. So let's bury him next to Rav Chia. Man ma'ayole. Now, who should physically maneuver Rav Huna's Aron into this burial chamber or burial crypt? Amrlahu Rav Chaga. Rav Chaga says the following: Ana ma'ayel nale. I will take him in. What's my reasoning? I already mastered Talmud by the time I was 18 years old. And in all that time, I never experienced Tuma. Mashmale Kameh, and I served him. I was his shamis. The Yadi Be'uvdei Diyoma. Yes, Rav Huna's. And I was Rav Huna's shamish, and I knew Vayadi Be'uvdei Diyoma. And I know, Vayadi Be'uvdei. And I know what his practices were. Diyom Echad is hapicha le ritzua de tefillin. One day, one of the straps of his tefillin flipped around. And the white side, they didn't have the black on black in those days. So on the white side was showing. V'yasev ala arba'in ta'anisa iluya. He said he fasted for 40 days because of the accidental flipping of his ritzua. Now, you'll recall, we came across the Gemara that said there was some opinion that says if your tefillin flips your chayav misa. And the Gemara eventually, and Tosas commented there, that really you're not chayav misa because sometimes it happens. You know what I mean? It's like, it happens. But here's a person who practiced mamish midas chasidus. He fasted for 40 days. Hava. Now, when Rav Chaga took Rav Huna into the burial chamber, Hava gane Yehuda mimine de'avua, v'chizkiya mismale. So Rav Huna's two sons, Yehuda and the younger son, Chizkiya, were on his right and left, respectively. Amarle Chizkiya. So the older brother, this is in the burial chamber, says to his deceased younger brother, Kumi duchtech, get up from your place. It's not nice to keep Rav Huna waiting. As soon as Chizkiya bar Rav Chiya stood up, whatever that means, Kam bahadei amuda denora, a pillar of fire stood up, accompanied him. This is clearly allegorical. I have no idea what it really means. The art scroll has a lengthy explanation. It's worth a look. Chazia Rav Chaga, so Rav Chaga sees this, ibis, and he was terrified, as I think we all would be.
Yeah.
So what did he do to protect himself? Zakfe la'arone. He held up Rav Huna's coffin to protect himself from this flame of fire from Chizkiya Rav Huna's body standing up. V'nafak asa, and then he left. He was out of there. Now, now the reason he was not hurt by this explosion, mishum de zakve la'arone de Rav Huna, because he held up the aron of Rav Huna as protection. Wild story. Now, kinach naf. Okay, so that's it for Rav Huna. Zecher Tzadik Kodesh L'Bracha. Kinach nafshi de Rav Chisda. Now, Rav Chisda, remember, was the protector of Rav Huna's teachings in this story. So kinach nafshi de Rav Chisda savar le'usiv sefer Torah apuya. So they also wanted to put a sefer Torah on Rav Chisda's beer. Amrlehu Rav Yitzchak milsa de la Rabbe lo svira le'ana nekum avid le. So something his Rebbe didn't do, you're going to do for him? How inappropriate is that? So Savar the Mishlo Karai. So they thought maybe that those who tore Kriya when Rav Chisda passed away, that maybe they shouldn't sew up their garments that they tore. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ami said, listen, for a Chacham, once you turn away from the mace, you can go ahead and sew up and mend your garments. Kinach nafshi de Rabbi Bar Huna v'Rav Huna, that when Rabbi Bar Huna and Rav Huna passed away, askinu lahasam, they took them up to their Eretz Yisrael, Chafei Amud Beis, kimatu agishra, that when they got to a bridge, somebody watch the clock, I have no idea what time it is. Kimatu agishra.
20 times.
All right. Let's see what happens.
Remember, he doesn't have the speed.
Kimatu agishra, when they got to a bridge, kamu gamle, the camels stopped walking. Amr lahu ahutaya. So an Arab merchant says to them, my favorite Gemara phrase, what in the world is going on here? Why aren't they moving? Amr le rabbanan de ka'avdi yikra hadadi, because they're showing honor to one another. Mar Amr Mar Nagel Bereshu Mar Amr Mar Nagel Bereshu. They're each like, hey, you go first, no, you go first. You go first, no, you go first. Amar, so the Taya says, the Arab says, Dina hu de Rabbi Bar Huna leil Beresha. Rabbi Bar Huna, who came from auspicious ancestry, should go first. So Chalif Gamle de Rabbi Bar Huna. So in fact, that is what happened. Rabbi Bar Huna went first. And the merchant's jaws and teeth fell out because he was therefore, he may have been right, but he was still disrespectful to Rav Hamnuna. Pasach alei hahu yanuka, and a young person started his hesped as following: Geza Yeshishim, Allah mi Bavel, v'imo sefer milchamos, that a disciple of sages came up from Bavel, and with him is the Sefer Milchamos. That refers to Rav. The latter refers to Rav Hamnuna. Ka'as v'kapod huchbalu. That's, I think, two types of birds, but refers to, Rashi explains, it's a klala, curse and affliction doubled. Liros b'shod b'shever. Haba mishinar, and we see that plunder and calamity are coming up from Babel. Katzaf alolamo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry at his world, the world that he created. V'chamas mimenu nefashos, and he took these nefashos from us. However, v'samach behem kekala chadasha, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy to have their souls back, as happy as a new bride. Rochev aravos sas v'sameach. He rode upon the heavens in happiness, b'va elav nefesh naki v'tzadik. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy to have these holy people back. Hinach nafshe de Ravina, when Ravina himself passed away, Pasach aleya ha'usavdana. A certain eulogizer said as follows: Tamarim haniu roshal tzadik. Date palm trees, wave your tops for this tzaddik. Kitamar nasim lelos kiyamim. Al masim lelos kiyamim. We should make our avelus at night like avelus in the day, just like Ravina learned all night and made his nights like days for learning Torah. Amarle Ravashi lebar kipuk hahu yoma. So Ravashi says to Bar Kipuk, hahu yoma, on that day, my amrit, what are you going to say? Now this question of Ravashi refers either to Ravina, which we just learned about, or to Ravashi himself. It was either after Ravina passed away, what are you going to say at the funeral? Or when I die, what are you going to say about me? So I'm not sure which of those two it is. It's either one or the other. Amrle, so Bar Kipuk says, Amina, I'm going to say the following. Im ba'arazim nafla shal hebes. If by cedar trees we have a big flame, ma yasu ezovekir. What are like the weeds in the wall going to do? Meaning if the mighty arazim are falling, what are the tiny among us going to do? Livyasan bechaka hoela. If the livyasan can be caught by a hook, a fish hook, and brought up to the surface, Ma yasu dage rekak. What are the tiny little fish in a pond going to do? If a running river becomes dry, ma yasu megavim. What are the still ponds going to do? So these are all, of course, mashalim. Like, we're toast. If the gedolim are falling, what are we going to do? Amar le bar avin chas v'shalom. So bar avin, another maspid, says to Bar Kipuk, chas v'shalom nachaka v'shal hebes b'tzadiki. God forbid you should refer to them as like fish hooks and flames. Amina, I would say Amina. I would never say that. Umay amrit. So what would I say? Aminu bechula avelim. Cry for those of us left behind. Velola aveda, but not to the one who lost his life. Shehila menucha v'anu la'anacha, because they're going to everlasting rest, and we're just going to sigh and wail. Cholash daite alayhu. So either Ravina or Ravashi. Rav Ashi was very upset by this. And he was so upset that they were punished by their feet turned upside down, such that if they would take a step, it would be the top of their feet hitting the earth, not the bottom. Sounds very painful. Hahu Yoma, on the day that he passed away,
Ravina
or Rav Ashi, Lo asula aspude, these two maspidim did not come to be maspid, either because they were too embarrassed or because they couldn't physically move.
Bar Kipuk or
Bar Kipuk,
or Bar Avin?
both of them. This is in the plural.
Right.
Lo asu, they did not come to be maspid. V'hainu damar Ravashi, lo bar Kipuk chalitz v'lo bar Avin chalitz. Neither one of them was able to remove their shoes because, of the whole foot thing. Now, Rava, ki hava asu diglas, when Rava got to the Tigris River, Amar le bar Avin, and he was concerned either about his own ability to cross safely, or he was concerned about, he lived there, the people who lived in the low-lying areas being flooded. Amar le Bar Avin, he said to Bar Avin, Kum ema milsa, say something, give me a tefillah. Kaiv Amar, so he stood up and said, Ba'u rosh shlishis b'mayim, that a third of Klal Yisrael, a rove of Klal Yisrael, shlishis is a euphemism for Klal Yisrael, is now here, and Rava was equivalent to most of Klal Yisrael. Zachor v'rachim, remember us, remember him, and have mercy. Te'inu me'acharecha ki isha mibala, even though we've turned away from you like a wife turns away from her husband. Al taznicheu ke'os me'mara, don't forsake us in a sign like the Mesota, meaning don't forget about us, please protect us. Okay, skip the parentheses. Rabbi Chanin Chasnei de Beis Nasiya, Rabbi Chanin, who was a son-in-law of the Beis Nasi, the Beis Nasiya Hava, Lo kahavu le bane. He never had children. Ba rachame v'havule. And he davened, and he was going to have a child. Hahu yoma dehavale. And on the day his child was born, nach nafshe, he died. So pasach alea ha'usavdana. So the maspid opened and said about him, simcha latoga nepcha, happiness has turned to sorrow. Sasun v'yagon nidbeku, a joy and sorrow or some other expression of sadness have joined together. Be'ez simchaso nanach, be'ez simchaso nanach. We are wailing, or he is wailing, at the sighing at the time of his simcha. Be'ez chaninaso avel chanino. At a time of his favor, the one that he prayed for is gone. The one who prayed for the child is gone. Asikule Chanan al Shmei. And they named this new child Chanan after his father. Kinach nafshi de Rabbi Yochanan pasach le Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar said about Rabbi Yochanan when he passed away, Kasha yom leYisrael ki yom ba'Shemesh b'tzorayim. That this is the day that is as difficult for Klal Yisrael as the day the sun stood still in the afternoon. When did that happen? That's the day that Yoshio, who was an amazing king, died. Now when Rabbi Yochanan passed away, Yosef Rabbi Ami Shiva v'Shloshim. Rabbi Ami sat Shiva and observed Shloshim. Amar Rabbi Abba Breda Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Ami David Lagarmehu David. Said Rabbi Ami acted on his own volition. This is not a psak for everybody else. He did it entirely on his own. As we have the following limit in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Ami, when he sat for Rabbi Yochanan, went against the teaching of his own Rebbe, because his own Rebbe said one day, certainly not Shiva, and definitely not Shloshim. When Rabbi Zera passed away, the Maspid said the following: Eretz Shinar Harav Yalda, that the land of Bavel birthed him and raised him. Eretz Tzvi Gidla Shashuha, but the land of Eretz Yisrael, the land of beauty, raised up. It's like Yeled Shashuim. It's delight. Oina la Amara Rakas. Woe is to us, said Rakas, which is a Tiberia. Ki avda klichem dasa, because its precious keli that absorbed all this Torah is now gone. Kinach nafshi de Rabbi Yavo achiso amude de Kesare Mari. When Rabbi Yavo passed away, the pillars of Caesarea poured water. To Rabbi Yossi, when Rabbi Yossi passed away, shafu marzave de Tzipore dama. The gutters of Tzipore flowed with blood. To Rabbi Yaakov, when he passed away, atachmiu kochve biyamama. We were able to see stars in the sky, which you're usually not able to do during the day. Nature literally flipped out of the massiveness of this loss. To Rabbi Asi, iyaku kol ilana. All of the trees were uprooted in his town by a massive storm. To Rabbi Chia, nachisu kipi denora mirakia. Stones of fire fell from the sky. To Rabbi Nachem, ishtod salmania v'habu l'machatzaya. All of the coins and all of the statues, their faces were flattened like flat slabs. To Rabbi Tanchum bar Chia, iskatzitzu kol andartaya. All of the, I didn't write down my translation on this.
Statue.
Anybody have it? All of the statues of the kings,
monuments, yeah.
the monuments to the kings, sorry, were destroyed. The Rabbi Yashiv, ichasru shivin machtarta b'naharda. 70 robberies occurred that night. His presence had protected them. The Rav Hamnuna, nachisu kipi devar demirakia. There was a flaming hail came down from the sky. The Rabbi Rav Yosef, when Rabbi and Rav Yosef passed away, Nashu kipe de pras ahadadi. The bridges that over the Euphrates kissed, meaning the bridges collapsed. The Abaye Rava, same thing. Nashu kipe de diglas ahadadi. The bridge over the Tigris River collapsed, and the ends of it kissed one another. Finally, kinach nafshi the Rabbi Sharshia taun dikle shitze. When Rabbi Sharshia passed away, the dekalim, the date trees, produced thorns. Adkan.